Good morning, everyone. It's Francis, Martin, and Curt for the Natural Law Institute. This is our, bi-weekly office hours Q&A. Today is Friday, August 21st, 2026, where you submit your questions. They miraculously get put into a document that I can read, where Martin has already answered them. He answers in red. I answer in blue. Does that mean anything? I don't know. Anyway, we I love messing with Martin. You have no idea. So we answer your questions. It usually takes us a couple of weeks to be able to get to them. Is that about right? About a month long. All right. So it takes us a couple of shows to get to them. Well, that's what we want. We want a month of backlog, right? It's apparently what we want to keep. All right. And we have hundreds now, right? I mean, I don't know how many. It's hundreds. A few hundred. Hundreds of them. So in any event, we're waiting for the AI to get good enough. It probably is at this point.
It already is. We're kind of bottled up on my time.
We're bottled. Yeah. We need a bigger staff. We got to find more victims. Anyway, so today we've got quite a few. Suki's done his usual job of getting us some hard questions. Excuse me. And then if you want to submit yours, the link, Francis puts the link in the description right below. And this stuff is, I guess, when you publish these things, they go to the live.
They go to the live. So on the NLI channel, there's a whole series of live, and every one of these are basically, as we go live right now, after the meeting, there can be Google, or rather YouTube runs a recording, and then just it becomes part of our live Q&A archive.
Yep. All right. So with that said, let's get started.
Okay, give me a sec to set up here. Try and move a few things around. All right. Question 1 from Suki. What books would you folks recommend in order to develop a very good understanding of physics and economics?
Well, I don't think either field still has definitive answers, and beyond a certain level, what you'll be learning is necessarily speculative. For physics, assuming you have basic high school understanding and want to look at heterodox authors we could endorse, look at maybe Hans G. Schan's Field and Energy, and then Stephen Wolfram and Ray Fleming, who Curt even planned to work with before Ray unfortunately died. For economics, honestly, I don't know what entry-level books to recommend other than the usual Austrian stuff, and then learning everything they get wrong afterwards. For corrections, I know I can endorse Frederick List and Ian Fletcher to correct errors about free trade, but otherwise, I can say I have found the errors by reading any economist, but more by connecting the dots with other fields, such as with evolutionary biology, as you can read in my recent article. I suppose I can recommend looking up what Kylar, Chesterton, and Belloc had to say on the matter. They may not have been doing math, but they immediately intuited everything economists love to ignore long before the effects were as apparent as today. I see Curt writing his own recommendations.
So I'm trying to find what did we do with the book list?
I know I've got that saved somewhere. Gosh, there's a link to it.
It might be still on the website, I think.
That's what I'm looking for. I got an IP address issue here. Is it on? Did I move to CurtDoolittle.com?
I'm sure it's on both sides now.
I'm searching for it. Well, I'll let you search for it. I'm just write down my answer.
I keep a reading list somewhere here in the vast set of archives we have across all our materials. There it is. Is this here? I'll publish it in the notes here. I can't find it here real quick. I don't see it. I don't see it. I don't know why it's not so easily visible. I don't know what I did. It's my fault either way. I'll give you the book list. There's a bunch of stuff to read on economics. Martin is telling you something that's important. What we have found that you're better off studying behavioral economics first, and then moving into if you want to understand there's 3 levels you want to look at. There's behavioral economics, largely what we do. The next level above that would be microeconomics, and then political economy, and then macroeconomics. Some people would ignore political economy, but given our work, we've found that's pretty important. The real
economy is political.
Sorry? All economics is
political.
political. Right. And so so there's a lot of branches of economics. The thing with economics that you need to internalize is thinking differently about the world using economic thought than physically or mathematically about the world using physical or usually the counting system. And that is that closure in economics is determined by the match of satisfaction of wants between supply and demand. And then the first principle of it, which is that you have to account for the seen and unseen. So if I decide to have a glass of orange juice and a cup of coffee, when I choose between them, the only real cost to me is the difference in price between one decision and the other. So, right. So that's what you're usually looking for is a full accounting of costs, which would be both the direct, indirect, or the seen and unseen. The premier book on this for teaching everybody the first principle economics is Economics in One Lesson by Henry Hazlitt. After that, I'm in the camp of Gary Becker. Gary Becker does social behavioral economics at social and political scale, or did. He's passed now. And I'm in Hoppe and camp of all human behaviors reducible to statements of property or demonstrated interests, with the term we use. And that was what gets us universal commensurability between human behaviors. So there's a bunch of very small, very core principles in it. But if you just start with Economics One Lesson, and then if we forget to publish our reading list, you can go through the reading list for other things there. I don't know, Martin. What you made a good point. How did you just say it? That we look at multiple fields, or you said something like that a minute ago when you were reading your answer.
That I didn't find errors of economics by looking inside the economics.
You look outside of it, right? So the problem is that you can learn economics, but you have to learn the limits of economics or the errors of economics by studying other fields, which is what we do, because we basically study everything. All right. So I will try to find that. I'll take it on myself to get that book list, reading list out there for you. I just can't believe I can't find it, but I cannot find it quickly. So have we killed that one, or do we need another one?
I was just might as well throw out my answers. I think fully support Curt and Martin's answers. Here's a few that I would add. Adam Smith's Wealth of Nations, and of course from F.A. Hayek, Will to Serfdom. You already mentioned Hazlitt's Economics in One Lesson. I think that's a great starting point. I would add a couple that are more recent, and I learned a lot about how it works. And by the way, these recommendations aren't necessarily in order, and nor do I have a really structured way of studying economics. I just find books that I found interesting and read on them, and they almost like puzzle pieces rather than starting big picture. These books pieced out different fields, and based on what I learned there, I just keep on exploring more. So Michael Pettis, he's lesser well known. He wrote a series of books, starting with A Volatility Machine, that really gets into debt, because he cut his teeth as a emerging market debt trader back in the days. And it kind of explains how countries' debt can act as, especially debt denominated in foreign currencies, can act either as an accelerant in times of economic growth or as a severe decelerant in times of crisis. And by extension, all these, his recent writings, I not read so much of his books, more focused on his blog article posts about how essentially global trade balances work. And that helped me to understand the international trade dynamics, as well as some of the root causes of the bind the United States find ourselves in. Ray Dalio, Principles of Navigating Big Debt Crisis. If you want to understand the 80-year debt cycle, where we are now, and possible ways of deleveraging and how that may play out in the next 10, 20, 30 years, this is a great book, whatever you think of him. And not so much economics, but just a way of looking at the world, is Taleb's Insertal collection, most famous by his book Food by Randomness, Black Swan, Anti-Fragile. And in this sense, for Taleb's books, I do recommend the reading order. So it's exactly in that order, because instead of 3 different books, these are really a series of books that build the concept on top of each other.
I absolutely endorse Taleb. I should have included him, including the last book, Skin in the Game.
Yeah, I haven't read that one. I have it somewhere. I just haven't read it yet.
Yeah, it's as good as the other one. Yeah, also as the third one in the middle, which is just...
the Better Procrustes.
Yeah, it's just his aphorism, you can skip that.
The Better Procrustes read to me sounds a little bit more like, I don't know how to describe it. Like he was just having fun ranting. You know what I mean? Well, whereas Food by Random's Anti-Fragile, Black Swan, I've read these books years ago, and I grasp the concept. I can summarize. I used to be able to summarize each book in one sentence. This is what I learned from these books. The other 2 of his books, I either didn't read them thoroughly, or I couldn't quite get a central thesis out of them. But yeah,
go ahead.
I'll definitely include them. I mean, Amazon sells them in a nicely bundled 5-volume, one of those box sets that you can put on the shelf. And so that's the one I got.
I forgot probably the most. Usually, I go in this order. I found the page, by the way. It's actually just Natural Institute /reading-list. So it's reading-list. That's all it is. The ones I put in here are for the entry level, which is to get the basic principles. Are The Fable of the Bees by Bernard Mandeville, right? The second one is iPencil, which is a division of knowledge and labor.
Also Hazlitt?
What?
Is that written iPencil? Is that written by Henry Hazlitt?
Leonard Reed. Nobody. Economics One Lesson by Hazlitt, and then Basic Economics by Thomas Sowell. if I told you if you read those things, you'd
yes,
have
that one.
Yeah, I don't know why I forget it. It's because it's like, well, everybody reads that, right? No, you know what I mean? Everybody doesn't read that.
I totally forgot about it. I even have it on audiobook.
I think for most people, if you can get through that, and then you can manage you can manage two more things. If you get those basics, you will get it, right? That's the basics, right? The principles. There's two other things after Thomas Sowell. One would be Gary Becker's book. What's it called? I can see the cover. It's orange cover. See books. It's the orange cover. God damn it! Yeah, The Economic Approach to Human Behavior. By Gary Stanley Becker. That's the one. You could read anything by Becker and anything by Sowell, and your life will be better than it. I mean, there's a lot of people who say, if you just read Thomas Sowell, you understand everything, everything.
You won't. He denies genetics.
Yeah, yes, but that's
not his field of specialty. I mean,
right.
Like we tend, like some experts, or so-called experts, they should know themselves better rather than thinking they're good in one field and they're good for all. But that
commutability is good for mathematics, but not elsewhere.
I mean, like Tom Sowell never claimed that he's really good with science or physical sciences or mathematics or anything like that, right? Or at least I've never heard him doing that. So at least he has a self. There's that term keeps on coming up in Chinese. I don't know the English. He has a self-awareness of not to claim such thing. But then at the same time, like the audience, the general public also should not expect that. Should not expect the
right. So Gary Becker. The last thing is, here's how I actually studied. I suppose why don't I talk about this more often? When I wanted to master economics, I got an economics glossary, and I memorized it. It was really right. You just read it, and that gives you the principles. Then I pulled out the ones that were relevant to our work, and I made a glossary of things that were relevant to our work. But the shortcut to that is, I can't remember what it is. It's probably in Wikipedia. Just the list. Look for a list of economics concepts or principles, and there's like 50 core ones, and maybe it's. In other words, you can understand the boundaries, the first principles of economics, as a list that's not that long. And so that list is available also. If I can find that link, I'll put it in the notes.
Suggestion I'd make, as long as it's just descriptive, there's probably a reasonable chance it's correct. As soon as it's prescriptive from an economist, it's definitely wrong.
Mm-hmm. What are the 10 principles of economics? I don't know if I would reduce it to 10. I think there's people make trade-offs. Yeah, okay, great. Exactly. Those top 10 lists is great. Okay, so did we answer that one?
Yeah. Curt, can you post the link to the NLI reading list in the Q&A doc? And then I'll just post it in the video description once we're done.
Natural law.
I already posted one link that I found on Doolittle.com.
Thank you.
Is it the same link? Or I mean, it's
well, obviously not. It's not the same
is
site.
it the same list?
Well, the list hasn't been updated since I think 2019. So yes, it's the same.
I don't think I've added anything to it. Okay, done.
Okay.
I'll fix it. Probably like
Thank you,
this.
Martin.
All right.
Thank you,
Question
Martin.
2 from Suki. This question is directed specifically to Martin, although others are welcome to respond. Martin places considerable emphasis on socialization being local and homogeneous, not merely in terms of ethnicity, but also religion, ancestry, culture, custom, moral assumptions, and the other forms of continuity that binds a people together. What then does Martin make of the growing tendency of for people to outsource much of their social life to the internet rather than socializing primarily within their immediate geographic environment? Many people now form their close friendships through online interest groups, political communities, religious circles, subcultures, and other digital networks, Reddit, X, and Discord forum. For some, the internet becomes their principal means of socialization, relationship forming, and even meeting potential partners. This is often because they can find people online who resemble them more closely in temperament, values, interests, ideology, or worldview than the people available to them locally. The reason I ask is that online socialization appears to unbind social life from geography. A person may feel substantially closer to a political, intellectual, religious, or cultural group found online than to people physically surrounding him in his town or neighborhood. His actual sense of tribe may exist online, while the people around him continue participating in the local churches, custom institutions, and shared practices of the geographic community. And this becomes especially meaningful if a good percentage in a certain locale does this to a non-trivial degree. This seems capable of changing friendship preferences, mating preferences, political loyalties, social obligations, and the degree of attachment people feel toward those in their immediate surroundings. A person may physically inhabit one community while psychologically, socially, and morally belong to another community dispersed across the internet. So my essential question is, what does Martin make of this development?
Well, obviously, it's not a good thing, and I say this as someone affected as much as anyone else. These relationships rarely translate into anything in the real world, beyond meeting every once in a while, if even that. Shared experience, let alone shared hardship and shared sacrifice, just aren't there, and when any need or crisis emerges, the individual usually finds he's on his own. Furthermore, because it's frictionless, it's easy to just find people who agree with you and approve of your dysfunction and never get a pushback that may lead to correction, not to mention how the online sexual marketplace or the sterile simulacrum thereof affects people. This is not to say the internet is the sole factor here. A lot can be attributed to people compensating for atomization, whose beginning preceded widespread and fast internet by many decades. Nor am I saying that it never leads to anything good, only that the overall trend I see is what it is. It's why I keep telling Curt the ideology of removing frictions from everything is actually evil, when so many of those frictions were load-bearing for everything that makes life worth living, and that actually produces future generations. We ought to be rebuilding those frictions, if anything. Technical solutions are also misguided, and modern technology is a big part of the problem.
When you said that, I thought of Krasinski's surrogate activities. We substituted physical face-to-face interaction, which, by the way, is super high bandwidth, because not only do you visually see the person and hear their voice, but you can literally feel the vibration that their voice casts on your skin. Your brain does not consciously know that, but it's physical fact, right? And the smell, the micro expressions, and everything, it's just orders of magnitude higher bandwidth interaction than the virtual interaction. The case in point, I don't know about you guys, but for me, the NLI community was including, members of the staff, was virtual for the first 5 years that I've been following, until we had the fall 2023 gathering, and I got to see everybody face to face. And the information you can pick up in that kind of interaction is, frankly, just not substitutable. Yes, it's expensive to fly everybody together and get into one place and so on, but what you get out of it is also in proportion to that investment, if not more. I mean, I saw Martin for the first time in that meeting.
So Martin, I don't want to interrupt. Go ahead, Martin. Were you going to say something?
No, I was just chuckling, and it looks like I'm about to crash.
God dang it. I'm going to say that Martin is effectively right. I would like to say that something more deeply. Is he still there, Francis? Can you tell?
No, looks like he's frozen.
Well, I'm going to cover it while they go. Is that the smaller your universe, your social, professional, political universe, the more fragmentary it can become. The broader your relationship set, the less you're victim of it. So I look at this as a part of bowling alone. It's the decline of the civil society, right? So that we are finding people who agree with us, right? And we don't have to learn to compromise with people who agree with us.
Mm-hmm.
But so what's happening is we're not able to form political orders and social orders as easily, or rather political and social orders fragment more easily, because while it is possible to maintain the full spectrum of interpersonal, familial, interpersonal, social, economic, political and theoretical, and jurisdictional, in other words, locality, people in the same space. While it is possible to maintain all those different sets of relationships, what's happening is the discount on relationship formation. The discount on relationship formation made available by the internet and social media is pricing out of the system those things that are jurisdictional and require compromise. That's the correct way to look at it. And so Martin is correct. I mean, his argument is correct. And this is the primary argument against obsession with screens and social media and living in your house and watching Netflix instead of participating in the civil society. I don't know if there's a way to cure to this, because I can't see people giving up the addiction, nor can I see them giving up the discount on relationship formation, but because virtual relationship formation provides too heavy a discount on relationship formation, and it requires less adaptation and more positive reinforcement. And so basically, it's not that Martin's wrong, is that he can't be wrong. The question is whether that is solvable by one means or another. If you were in China,
not in a liberal democracy.
Not in a liberal democracy, it's not solvable. And so it's a little like the problem of reproduction. My argument, I think Martin and I both worked on this back in 2020, is that if you're going to have retirement and healthcare, whatever, old age insurance, you need to have produced the offspring sufficient to have paid for it. In other words, you need to do intergenerational transfer, and we need to stop doing the spending of what should have been intergenerational accumulation and transfer. And so it's possible to handle certain things that are economic, which is retirement and unemployment and healthcare and this kind of thing. It's possible to fix that problem through rational incentives available to everyone. What's harder is, how do you fix the socialization problem that Martin has identified, which is essentially an extraordinary discount on a personal means of consumption at the cost of your involuntary adaptation to your local jurisdictional behavior group, right? And working in their common interest. So it's sort of like not paying your social tax, right? Right, or not paying the fees of necessary for social coherence. So Martin's right. I mean, it's not a piece here.
Now it's even worse in that some people, especially women, are using AI to socialize instead of actual humans.
Yes.
Yeah. Good Lord. But, science fiction writers have written about this for decades. Just that technology have caught on, I guess.
Well, it's taken the Marxist alienation out of the political realm and into the social, right? I mean, it's taking it out of the blame somebody for it and into the organic consequence of it. Where's our goddamn? There it is. Gotta put my thing here. I'm blue, right? That's what I gotta do.
You can pick whatever color. You can pick purple.
There we go. Not done. All right. Did we kill that one?
Where did you wrote this if not in the doc? Just off on the side.
I have my own AI that knows my stuff.
Okay.
That has Curt prose, the Curt prose skill and three skills. And I just say, make this argument in Curt prose.
I think you rely too much on AI.
I think you're right. I think I do. And it's fucking okay with me.
All right. Let's see. Question 3 from Cole. Previously, Curt has spoke of NLI principles being ultimately applicable to not only the US, but the larger Anglosphere and Eurosphere. New Zealand doesn't have a written constitution due to its constitutional inheritance from Britain, and this paired with New Zealand's origin of bicultural demographics is used by our parasitic politicians as an excuse to scrap our white demographic policies, and import millions of Indians and various other unassimilable minorities. My question is, how applicable is NLI's reformed version of the US Constitution to a country like New Zealand and other British colonies like Australia?
Okay, so this is a great question, but it's mixing a couple of things. First is we, and Martin and I are deal with this all the time. There's the science of human cooperation. And in my work, I try to produce the limit of decidability. A new term we've got is called terminal decidability. And so that's what I try to do. All other things, here's how to think about it. All of the things considered, if you follow the natural law as I articulate it, you will produce the most cooperative velocity possible for your people to do so. All right, great. That's one thing. That's a statement of science, right? If we make a statement about the flow of water or the process, the manufacture of electricity, you never get to perfection, right? It's every process is lossy. So you're not going to get to perfection with human beings. What you are going to do is have a baseline to measure one thing against another. So what we're really doing is not saying you must do this. What we're saying is this is the thing by which variation can be judged. And so if you vary from this, you will pay these costs. That's what we're saying. It's the same thing as that we started out in the book mentioned a few minutes ago, which is that you have to account for the seen and unseen. All right. So what we tend to do as humans is we tend not to think through the externalities that occur from the behaviors we sort of influence. And in other words, we assert, and the behaviors we tolerate, we tend not to account for the externalities of them. And so instead of looking at our stuff as a philosophy, which I have been fighting ever since we started this, you should look at it as a system of measurement. And so we produce a system of measurement that says this is the way, this is the decidable means by which people can cooperate and determine how far you vary from that and what the costs and consequences will be. So that's number one. So that's what it's doing. Number two is, I'm going to screw this up. I know I am. I'm going to screw these steps up. Number two is that polities actually are different, right? They're demographically different. The Anglosphere isn't that demographically different, but you have, for example, in the UK, you have much more class warfare and war trauma than we have in the USA, right? And in Canada, you have this we don't need to be tough thing because we're next to the 800-pound gorilla, so we can act more virtuous even if it means we're not. In Australia, they are physically insulated like America, but they are strategically dependent on America. So they can play their little social games, partly because it's the population of Texas, which is 30 million people. There may be 40, I don't know. So around 30, last I knew. It's the territory nearly the size of the United States. So their problems are different from the world island, from the UK island, from the New Zealand island, from the North American, Canadian versus American island versus the Australian island. So you have a little differences because risks and therefore costs are different in each of these places. So some place like England, who does not have the resource capacity of Australia or America, is in a different position. Canada and Australia, which have about the same population, are relative to. I mean, Canada has 5 provinces, but they only have 30 million people or 36 million people or something like that, right? That's basically California, right, or Texas. So they have resources, but it's only arable in this narrow band that's basically within 100 miles of the U.S. border. Most of their population is actually below the U.S. border, which is down into the dip there in the Great Lakes region, just where Toronto is. So they have a different problem. Australia has an interesting problem, very similar to the United States, is it has at least the 2 coastal regions, east and west, to think about. They've really got all 4, but the way their population is distributed, and they have a fucking desert in the middle, just like we have in the United States, but they have resources. So the problem with their resources is their government, like the Russians, falls into the resource curse. New Zealand is luxurious. I mean, it's a wonderful piece of fucking real estate with a tiny population. I think it's 5 million. Does that sound about right? And so the problem is in each of those Anglo countries I just stated, everybody's trying to create a virtue signal, why we're good. That's what most polities try to do. And so what they're doing is actually virtue spiraling. I'm watching Francis to see if he puts that together.
I was actually looking at New Zealand's population. You're spot on. 5,357,300.
So what you really see is
what they're actually signaling without being aware of it is that they're more American than Americans.
That's probably true. That was smart, Martin. The problem, what you get into in with these virtue signalings, is first of all, it's more necessary in democratic polities. So one more feather in Martin's cap is the tendency of liberal political orders to attempt to basically seek virtue signals, which end up with virtue spirals. What that has done, now combine that with the international nature of the Anglosphere, which is that it's a naval, in other words, water-based island problem, right? The Anglosphere. And so what you get is this virtue signaling by these islands, right? They aren't like Czechia, bordered by anybody to counteract it. And in doing so, because they're separate people communicating remotely without near neighbors, and they're relatively isolated from external pressure, what they do is they treat other politicians in other countries as their peers, not their citizens. And so between their external focus, their virtue signal spirals, and the means available to them to virtue signal spiral, what they're really doing is using the feminine strategy of giving away other people's resources in order to obtain status and position for themselves. Now, most women do it by giving away their husband's resources. Go ahead. Go ahead.
Just a detail that we see this even in Europe, that European politicians, instead of seeing representation of their country as their highest achievement in life, it's just a springboard to end up working for some American corporation. So
or the EU.
Manage periphery of an empire to get some position in the center later.
Correct.
So again, this is the manifestation of removal from friction, remove external pressure, especially in the sense of Europe. I mean, you didn't see that of the European powers, the late 19th century, early 20th century European powers, right? Because they had that neighboring competitive power. But under Pax Americana, this starts to fester.
Well, that's the whole argument, right? The argument has been, there's no means of producing. The reason the American empire has worked is that it's actually a defensive empire of trade. In other words, let's defend world trade so everybody prospers, right? That's its strategy, right? So they do. They focus on trade and human rights, and that is their means of solving the industrial age instead of the agrarian age difference in economies. So the problem you get is that you need to have an empire. Martin and I disagree with the imperial notice statement, Martin. I think there's no There's no word for what the USA does yet, right? Which is you have you've essentially imposed rule of law, right? A form of rule of law instead of a rule of discretion. And so when you impose that, then you can get this world federation that we've been trying to build. The problem is, as is always, the fucking elites begun treating each other as their customers and clients rather than their populations as clients, right? And so they become this world.
Why wouldn't that be inevitable, though?
No, I'm saying it's inevitable. I'm agreeing with you, right? The problem is, how do we fix it? You know what I mean? There's the benefit.
Well, we just don't do that at all.
We say
it was
that.
a mistake.
Okay, Martin, how old are you? I can't even remember how old you are.
35. Yeah.
35. All right. In my mind, you're perpetually 40, so I can't get it. I don't know why. Maybe it's because you act like a grouchy old man all the time. Is that why?
I guess.
Oh, come on. You're supposed. He does in public. He's very gentlemanly like this. In private, he'll say something snarky back to me that is usually funny. Anyway, so it's a problem, but you still get the benefit of, holy shit, look how much quality of life we've brought to the world in the past 70 years. It's phenomenal.
But who cares about the world?
What?
Who cares about the world? Why aren't we doing what's best for us?
Why don't we do what's for us? Because at the time we have developed the post-war argument, the problem was communism. And just like today, the problem is Islamism.
In practice, but when you look at the biggest problems with communism, America was more communist than Soviets.
Okay, I can't go there because I don't want to go down that rat hole. That becomes a game of semantics.
Usually, the fight was just over getting more clients to American side, and usually that involved actually outcompeting Soviets from the left ideologically.
No.
Yeah.
All right. I don't want to have that discussion right now. So I think we can say we closed this issue. I basically said Martin's right. Is that what I said?
Good.
I know that makes you happy, Martin, because Martin's in Martin's mind, I'm the slow kid on the block, and that I eventually get there if he's patient enough.
You might have answered in a long-winded way, but his main question: how applicable was the analyzed reformed version of U.S. Constitution to a country in New Zealand, other British colonies, Australia?
It's perfectly the problem. Okay, because I told you I would get lost and I would forget what I was doing. That's because I missed point 3. Point 3 is the problem. The Constitution is perfectly applicable. You can customize it to your specific needs of your people. It's just natural law, and you just make policies that accommodate the demographic distribution and geographic distribution that you have. I mean, if you're the United States, we have to spend a lot of shit on infrastructure. Okay. We almost have to have a car economy, right? If you go to Russia, they can't do it. It's 11 fucking time zones, and almost nothing between point A and point B is productive enough to pay for the transport of shit in and out of it. So you have these real issues that you can put together in different polities. I mean, England has a serious problem. It made a lot of bad choices in a row. And it made bad choices in response to thinking they were going to correct those bad choices. So they're fucked. So if we look at it from that perspective, the problem isn't our work was going to work. The problem B isn't that they can be customized to your particular need. The problem is C. it's a rotation of elites such that we can put the policies in that and enact the policies. You have to have some means of implementing such policies in order for them to work. And you have an awful lot of people built up in the post-war era because the Soviets created the idea of the Prussians created the idea of the managerial state, but it was a military managerial state. The communists decide to destroy property and go to communism. The Germans it made its state capitalism. Really, they used the private sector to accomplish state ends by prohibiting all sorts of things that were pretty good to prohibit, actually, and demanding other behaviors. They essentially created what should have been the next civil religion. The U.S. created this post-war thing that Martin positions as a false promise, which is just another way of selling people on consumer capitalism when we're selling people on democracy when we shouldn't be selling democracy. We should be selling rule of law. And even though we're selling democracy, we're not really selling that. We're selling consumer capitalism. And consumer capitalism is hard on people. It's not hard on people if they can compete. It's hard on people if they can't compete. So you end up with, America being better for the upper middle classes, middle and upper middle classes. You end up with UK being better for UK and Canada being for the lower middle and lower classes. And you end up with Australia and New Zealand trying to figure out where they want to play in that mix. It's all virtue signal spiraling.
Okay.
So
I think we answered his question, which is the reformed version of the U.S. Constitution is very much applicable to the specific, just adjust a few parameters for the geopolitical realities of the specific countries. The implementation, which, by the way, he did not ask, just to, scope this question, the implementation is the hard part. You actually need a counter elite that's powerful enough and educated enough to realize the benefit of this reformed constitution and the political means to implement it.
These things usually happen in response to internal crisis, which is civil war, external crisis, which is war, and natural crisis, which is plague, destruction or interruption of trade routes, those are usually the ones. But you can get things that are just the collapse of certain technologies, or food shortages. Like, what's going to happen if we can't keep the seas open and we can't ship just wheat around the world?
I would say so. Then nations with geographical borders will have to. Their population will have to be reduced one way or another to their carrying capacity. I.e., there's none of this China raising 20%, if that, of the world population on 7% arable land anymore. The Chinese population will probably go back to 400 million one way or another.
So these are. Go ahead.
I mean, it sounds good that populations are getting reduced to carrying capacity.
Yeah. Okay. So Martin, here's the problem, right? That's your preference, right? And my preference would be probably to that the natural course of events will get us there, and some others' preference would be we need to maintain this system so that we can maintain growth. Because while we might look at the long term, you and I might look at the long term, some people look at the medium term and some people look at the shorter term. And so it's just very hard to make those things work by dictate.
And I would say this, we may look at a long term, but you have to get through the short term, medium term for the long term to happen. And people tend to underestimate that.
I see growth as a variable end to target.
No,
If
growth maybe, but progress isn't. If we do not progress, we cannot outrun the Red Queen.
That's right.
Sure.
This human, the Homo sapiens, will die on this planet eventually.
Yeah.
Yeah, but then we actually need to distinguish what needs to grow and what is just producing.
Here's a very simple way I look at it.
Consumption.
Right? Here's a very simple way I look at it. So we evolve on this planet to essentially conduct computation, evolutionary computation, so that hopefully one day we become multiplanetary and instead of dying in the cradle. To do that, we need sufficient computational capability in this network called Homo sapiens. And until we truly get AGI that can help to do some of our thinking for us, the number of nodes in this computational network that you call Homo sapiens is still it. Now, you may argue that some nodes are just dead weight, and I agree with you. But we still need more nodes to compute, the more nodes that actually can do the compute, to do the computing.
I see computation as such a vague term as to be useless. We have to distinguish what's just wasteful and what actually has a chance of contributing to producing technology that can get us off this planet.
Yeah, but here's the thing. Until we computed and came to the stable relationship that can get us off this planet, I'm trying to say this, you don't know whether something is going to be a failure, or you don't know, like, before you actually arrive at the stable relationship. You can't say, you simply don't have the foresight to say, well, this is clearly going to end up in failure, so let's not invest in that. And this active computation exploration has a lot of dead ends.
I am saying a lot of this wasteful consumption that we see around us is clearly never going to lead there. It's hindering it, if anything.
I don't want to go down this, but I don't want to disagree because I don't want to argue it. But there's no, the energy consumption and transformation per person is essentially the measure of evolution. And the Red Queen is a bitch.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of reasons we can disappear pretty easily, and we have not enough control to defend against it.
Okay, I think we can just end on this note and move to the next question.
All right.
All right, question 4 from Cole again. I was very interested to hear Curt discuss his theory that the great filter could be the inability to enact eugenics policies and selection pressure. My question would be, is it too late for the West to reverse the consequence of our inaction? And if not, how difficult of a process would it be to reboot some sort of initiatives in the States and the Great West and the Greater West? What would be the main issues, obstacles with the ambition of this magnitude? By the way, Cole, I didn't read your question ahead of time. Somehow our conversation in the last question just led to this, but it's a great segue into this question.
It's almost never too late if it's actually what elites want to do. The elites we have obviously don't, so it depends on which you're asking.
We have removed more selection pressure than is in our interest. Is the way to frame it. In our long-term interest. So what's the question really asking?
Is it too late? One. If not, how difficult the process would be.
Okay, the problem is creating a circumstance where it's possible to implement. Like we were doing really well in the United States through 1964, you know. We had done a very good job. If we had sent the slaves back to Africa, we would have been in great shape.
Well, arguably, even that prosperity is a result of consumption of previously accumulated genetic and social capital.
The West overall did pretty good until the First World War.
Yep, the argument, right? Central argument.
I mean, there were obviously terrible trends that led to those wars in the first place, but in many ways it was peak.
Yep.
Isn't around that time also when what's the name of that society Margaret Sanger established? Planned Parenthood.
Yeah.
It's also around that time, right? Progressive era.
Yeah. The Planned Parenthood is eugenics organization.
Yeah.
The purpose was originally
started focusing on lower the fertility of African Americans.
Yeah, that was the idea. Right.
That's an alternative to sending them to Africa.
If you can't send them back, then eventually let's genocide them over 200 years. Which sounds evil, of course.
Well, the problem here is that if we hadn't had the Nazi experiment and the Jewish counter-rebellion against it, which is really, you could wrap the whole Jewish counter-rebellion, post-war Jewish counter-rebellion as just a reaction to the eugenics movement.
And they would have sought any excuse to undermine it, I'm sure.
Okay, so yeah, probably true.
Okay,
Yeah,
so maybe we actually move on to the third sub question of this. What are the main issues, obstacles with an ambitionless attitude? So
well, the obstacles are there's just one. It's just that there has to be a problem that it will fix. In other words, and the only way to get to that condition is for the mythos, the post-war mythos of the equality of man to end. And to restore in the Christian dogma that we're all equal to end. So we have to get rid of those two things in at least in our culture. It's not bothering the Chinese any. So if we were to get that, the question is, under what conditions would we be once again willing to tolerate it? And can that condition happen before our IQ drops further? Because we've already dropped from 100 to 98, and I see 96 on the horizon. So
in Anglosphere, it was at one point supposedly at 115.
Yes, that's right. The problem, it started out being asymmetric reproduction. We stopped being class selective. And the second problem is immigration. And so, well, the first problem is, yes, stop being selective, and the second was immigration. But immigration is actually the real problem. I mean, if you have a lot of people around 100 reproducing, but if you bring in people who are 85 to 95, I mean, that's a fucking disaster right there. And so that's what we've done. And then we bring in people that are from cultures that aren't assimilable.
I want to double click on the previous point. What's the Jewish incentive back in World War II time frame or early 20th century? What was their incentive to counter the eugenics movement?
Well, because the Nazis treated it as a eugenics
Okay,
problem.
so basically,
No.
it's their counter to the Nazis. They don't have the
Yes.
inherent counter to the eugenics. It's because Nazi did it, and Nazi hate them, and therefore the Jews hate it.
I mean, I don't. I mean, I haven't had the chance to talk to one of the better rabbis about this question. I know who to talk to if I wanted to have that conversation, but so I'm not positive. They would say it that they're God's chosen people, and that their destiny is to rule. That's what they would say.
That's a better rabbi, is it?
What?
That's a better rabbi, is it?
Yes.
You were going there. Well, he is the better rabbi because he's at least honest about it, not trying to deceive you about it.
Yes.
It's the political rabbis that are. It's political Judaism, which I'm not even sure is a rabbinical issue. That's a problem.
How can Judaism not be political when they believe?
Well, okay. So that's a term we use for the political activism that they use in the West to undermine us, right? But when you talk about just talking to rabbis in their Jewish tradition, conservative rabbis they're basically about the family, and they don't want to be fully integrated into the West because their view is it dilutes the family truthfully, and it makes the family sacrifice on behalf of the commons, which it does, because the West is essentially a military order rather than a familial order, which it is. So I don't, a familiar social priestly order. So the Jewish strategy is feminine, and they do what the female does. Or we've covered this for years now. So I don't think there's anything miraculous there, but as a sense of how they view it, as far as I know, they view it as they're the chosen people, and the fact that they have been producing outliers, and that they're successful in the fields that they choose to enter into, which is, I'm sorry, mostly baiting into hazard, not entirely, but mostly. Then you get you get the evidence that they are what they are, but their view is that they're actually better. Okay, well, our view is that we're better, right? Not everybody, certainly the achieved civilizations view that they're better. The funny one is India, because they're very convinced they are, and I have no idea how they get there. But anyway, it's hard to argue with Europe.
I think self-reflection is also a pretty unique trait that very few people have developed.
Yes, that's true.
I guess Asians do all right, but otherwise it's mostly a European male thing.
What was self-reflection?
Yes.
All right, did we kill that one?
Let's see. Did we answer the 3 sub-questions?
It's not too late. It's never too late. It's just that what does it require to produce the opportunity for you to implement it? I mean, that's the hard part.
Well, and it needs to be rotated. That's answer to almost everything.
Yeah,
and that's the hard part.
Yes. Okay.
All right.
What time have we got? 8:26. We're okay.
Yeah, we're okay. Question 5 from Suki. Any ideas for how to prevent tragedy of the commons situation in cities in relation to hygiene, keeping streets, public restrooms, and the like? What kind of incentive strategies and such could meaningfully change this kind of human behavior? I have noticed that Starbucks, at least in my area, have locked restrooms in which only employees can tell you the PIN to unlock the restroom, and they rotate daily. Thoughts on that strategy in relation to things like this? And if desired, Feel free, after the question is answered or in service of answering the question, discuss the requirements of the environment and the people involved, and incentives that must be in place such that the serious sense of civic commonism can be rehabilitated, and such tragedy of the common situation can be meaningfully attenuated. So I'll just say this: you fix that by fixing the people, because I don't see such problems when I travel in Japan. I see tons of and even worse problems in China. And genetically, the Japanese and Chinese are not that different.
It's not the people themselves, it's how they relate to each other. Tragedy of the commons, while apparently originally devised by an ecologist and white nationalist, is now a libertarian and neoliberal deceit used as a justification for privatizing everything. The error is in assumption about what commons are. It's not something anyone can freely use, which does indeed lead to unsustainable use and abuse. It's an exclusive common property of a specific group of people with internal rules for who can use what and how, and a threat of punishment for misuses and abuse. You cannot have civil rights law or any sort of anti-discrimination law and have commons at the same time. You likewise cannot have any sort of general prohibition of authority and have commons at the same time.
I'm going to state that slightly differently because it works flawlessly, as Singapore has demonstrated with extraordinary, almost perfection. And of course, and it has become so standardized in Japanese culture that it doesn't have to be mentioned anymore.
But realize they enforced it in completely different ways.
Go ahead.
In Japan, it was enforced through essentially social contract, i.e., this is what the Japanese do. You don't see severe punishment for anyone. Or recently it's starting to, because too many outsiders have been coming in. But like it's for the Japanese, it's unseemly that you don't keep the street in front of your house clean and free of garbage and that sort of things, right? Whereas in Singapore, it's very much of a Confucianism, authoritarian government, i.e., if you spit on the street, I'm going to whip you 10 times until like you're spitting into your thick skull that you don't do that.
Yeah, the thing is though, let's go with this because it's a brilliant insight. So the problem is that there's a difference between engineering and evolving, right? There's a reason that the Japanese evolved like that, and there's a reason that the Singaporeans didn't, right?
I would say even in the process of evolution, there was somebody engineering those norms, perhaps very far back, but still.
Yeah, but there's a whatever reasons they were able to do that were present, right? And so for whatever reason, those reasons didn't exist in other places. India, let's use the street shitting, I guess what they call it.
They don't call it that. We call it that.
Is that what we call it? Anyway, so it's a foul place. It's a foul place. Now it's getting better. My understanding is better. I haven't been back in a long time. So, but it's the advice I got before traveling there was don't touch anything that isn't you. That's how filthy it is. And when I was first learning traveling, that you had to get shots to go there. So it's a filthy place. Why? Well, there's historical reasons for it, but in any event, these cultures didn't have the manners, ethics, morals, and civic limitations on them that were imposed elsewhere, and frankly, they may not have the self-regulatory capacity that others do. In India's case, so the net result of that map is that yes, you can evolve it naturally, you can institutionalize it early and well. But if you want to brute force it, get it done so that it's long enough that it becomes a natural behavior rather than an enforced behavior. That only takes a couple generations. So, I mean, if you want to enforce it, enforce it. You can enforce it to happen, but you have to police it. Here's what a tragedy that commons is not primarily a failure of motivation. It's a failure to assign ownership, monitor use, impose liability, and exclude defectors. In other words, it's the same argument I made about if you start with a government that is essentially a minority military, and that minority military wants to produce economic stability in order to tax and fund itself, they can produce rule of law quite effectively, right? And it will actually take root over time, because once you've implemented rule of law, everybody pretty much benefits. The problem becomes, do you get military capture? Well, the same problem happens in bureaucracies. Can we implement a rule of law in bureaucracies to administer it? Well, you get bureaucratic capture. So, I mean, the problem is always you've got to create the rules and enforce them. But the ability to create and enforce rules also creates the incentive and capacity for capture. Pain in the fucking ass.
Now that I take that and I apply it to the Japanese lens, I wonder when in Japanese history they started the process. I.e., I can't imagine, all throughout Japanese history, the Japanese people behave the way that they do today. They did get their military capture by a minority, i.e., in the at least as recent as the Tokugawa shogunate, and then even after the Meiji Restoration, you could argue it's more of a military government. It's just that a different set of samurais replaced the previous samurais, right? The
Sure.
set of samurais are more open to adopting Western ideas and so on, but it's still just ruled by the military aristocracy.
Right.
Until after World War II, it basically broke their military aristocracy.
Oh, so military hierarchy constrains you a lot. So it's like there's the military and the mafia, right? I mean, two different things. The military is trying to maintain its legitimacy. The mafia isn't.
No, but if you look at it from the lens of sedentary bandits, the sedentary bandit theory, they're actually not that different. It's just that the military government is one stage more advanced down the ladder, as in they are more sedentary than the mafia. And of course, the lowest on the totem pole, they're not even sedentary bandits, are your roaming bandits.
Yep.
What we see with mafia is when they actually gain control over territory, they increasingly take over government's functions, including
that's how governments evolve. The governments evolved from sedentary bandits, which then became mafia, and then it became, actually government taxation.
Oh, it's the same as England. It's the same as England. It's medieval village commons. Yeah. The thing is, if you're all farmers, and really China's been farmers longer than fucking anybody. So if you're farmers, you're not that far apart. And in villages, what you do is he may have more oxen, but you'll trade something with him and he'll plow your field. So there's commons and then there's pseudo commons, right? There's things that people do for each other in exchange, right? That build it. So there's a shared responsibility, because if you're ostracized from those commons, you're going to starve to death. And so there's extraordinary pressure not to impose costs on commons. So the commons discipline developed between 12 and 1700. The urban civic sanitation from 1890 to 1935. And the school and neighborhood institutions that enforce it are really from 45 onward. But so it's the same thing as England. England and Germany. Yeah, absolutely.
So which country were you citing? Japan?
Japan, yeah. So it's the same exact process for the same exact reasons. You have an island, right? You have marginal indifference between almost everybody, but that they're not. When you say they're poor, they're not really. It might even be a subsistence economy, but it's not. It's actually a really reasonable economy. And so that they they develop a civil society, the civic society, and so they develop commons, and that commons is actually the foundation of what they got there. There's also an IQ point thing and a traditional behavior thing, and also a bunch of other stuff going on. But it's a military aristocracy. The failure of the inability of the military aristocracy to concentrate power, because of that, similar fragility to the Germany in particular, and then the necessity of sharing assets and producing individual goods by creating common goods. So it's the same shit. The cholera, it's like, so we had the same thing. Like, that's why we have such running water and clean water everywhere in America, was the typhus, the problem. And so that's why we got sanitation so worked out. That's why we got the soap and water and bathrooms and clean and public water. So in Tokyo, it was the cholera epidemic in the 1900 cholera epidemic. So, and then of course they have their emphasis, which they got from the Chinese, on education, and the Meiji schools just started incorporating everything on forward. So, all right, now it makes perfect sense. Everything the Japanese do makes sense. The thing about
they are least due to their geographical disadvantage, in a sense, since their home island has no natural resources, whatever. They're the people with the least that can least afford to make bad choices.
Correct. I always thought when I was very lucky studying China in college, for completely unrelated reasons. Most of my studies started out with the Mongols, right? I was studying the Mongols, and that led me to study China. And when you realize how many problems China has, you know what I mean? It's like, that's a big fucking place, the interior, the exterior, the mountains, the deserts, the rivers, and you're like, okay, well, under that, everything makes sense when you look at the problems they have. So if we flip it around and talk about Japan, right? They have problems, but they're under their control. In other words, they aren't so worried about invaders, right, and uprisings and that kind of stuff, are they?
Oh, it's a different set.
Where everything about the West only makes sense when you understand it's run by its enemies.
Wow, I gotta disentangle that one. Can I hear Francis's response, and then we'll come back to this question? So, Francis, what are you gonna say?
I forgot what I was saying. No, okay. I think they have different set of problems. It comes back to the carrying capacity problem, right? Japan, until about the when was the measure restoration? 1860s-ish, right? Basically, they can run as a completely autarkic, homogeneous society isolated from the rest of the world because nobody can really get to them. And they existed that way in stagnation during the Tokugawa shogunate for 250, 300 years or something like that.
Yes,
right?
a couple hundred years.
After there's, I learned the other, like 700 years of warring state period. If you think like our Civil War is bad, just imagine that warring state period going for 700 freaking years. Well, it probably is also eugenic selection pressure during all that warring period. But now their problem is that they are an industrialized economy, and they don't have the resources to keep that industrial economy going on their home islands.
Yep.
So they basically are forced to engage with the rest of the world. They can't go back to of course, they can, but then the living standard will just drop to the stone bottoms, sort of go back to the shogunate periods. So yeah, they have different problems to manage. And I wouldn't be surprised that in 25, 30 years or so, that we're going to be talking about Japanese expansionism again.
Yeah.
With Pax Americana withdrawing, they're going to have to secure those resources somehow. Or otherwise, there are people going to starve. City's going to go dark.
I remember David Friedman, is it? Predicting Japano-Turkic alliance.
What?
Japano-Turkic alliance.
Japan and Turkic alliance.
Yeah,
Like
I don't know. I don't know why he figured that one out.
I don't see that at all.
Yeah, me neither. Just saying.
All right. So Martin, can we switch over to what you were that you said something about the USA and I couldn't capture it? You said controlled by the West.
That's whereas choices of every civilization make sense, the modern Western choices only make sense after you understand it's run by its enemies.
That's run by and it's influenced is too soft a word, and run by is too strong a term. But yeah, you're right.
If that influence is decisive, what's the difference from running it?
I'm looking at it from two ways. From the internal seditionists, right, that I know you're mentioning, and from the external competitors, it ends up being true. It doesn't mean there aren't good things. It means that the good things aren't good enough to preserve the internal control.
The good things are what has remained there from before, or what seems to be an improvement just due to technological.
Exactly. Okay.
Oh, we got time for one more.
I think we got one more.
Justice. All right.
Question
6 from Suki. What conclusions have been made by the Institute regarding political parties, their costs, benefits, and whether they should exist, and if so, in what form? And this was one of the more talked about topics during the foundation of the United States of America by the founding fathers.
Representative democracy is a terrible idea, so it follows that parties are a terrible idea. Founding fathers may have been against them, they still produced a system that quickly made them inevitable.
So let me ask a question, because this is an interesting one, because I've thought about this quite a bit. So there's different properties of a party. In the US, is there any institutional means? Yes, there is. What are the institutional means by which a party has any influence whatsoever?
The institution means that the party have any influence whatsoever.
For example, so here's how I see a party having an effect. Joining a party lets you advertise what you support and criticize. Right. So that's what a party does. Joining a party lets you use their funding and election infrastructure. That's what it allows you to do. And joining a party allows you to develop allies in passing legislation. Now, people would say, well, this party gets to have this and that in the Congress. But that's just saying that I'm voting for this guy, right? I'm voting for people who I agree with or disagree with. So parties in a lot of countries, in European countries, have real meaning. Parties in America are just the term for dominant party and the weak party. And we rotate those constantly.
Well, some would say inner party and outer party.
Correct. It's the same thing. Yeah, it's dominant and weak parties.
Well, it's actually permanent. Democrats are the inner party, Republicans are the outer party.
Well, that's new now, but because that change happened in my lifetime. Because the Civil War created a problem, a dislike of Republicans in the South. Lincoln was a Republican. The Democratic Party in the South had both conservative and progressive branches. That ended in my lifetime, so that the South ended up looking like the rest of the country. And this changed the weight of the party system in America, because it gave it the means by which to further specialize left and right. Once women were given the pill and entered the economy after 1970, that accelerated. So it's the pill, college education, decrease in motherhood, decrease in marriage, increase in finance and agency. It was accelerated by women. And then immigration took it further, so that it's really just men versus women is the deciding. Men versus women and are decide, and independents are actually the deciders, and independents are the least educated, least aware, at least educated people.
And then the elected elites do something else entirely anyway.
Correct. So our court, they're undermining our court now the way they undermined the legislature. And so that's getting ahead of itself as well. But the reason we've been able to hold it together so far has been the court. I don't see that happening much longer. Don't know what to tell you. So what's our question here? Do we have a question?
Regarding political parties, institutes,
the position is, if you're going to have elections, you're going to have parties. Mm-hmm. Because the party is just another term for a faction. And a faction is just a term for people with competing interests. So you're always going to have factions.
Yeah, that's kind of what I arrived at after I read this question. It's just the natural formation based on incentives.
Right. So
then should we have elections?
I would say if we have elections of people who demonstrate responsibility, that would be, we could have elections, right?
Even if we don't have elections, and let's say that we're in a absolute monarchy, you're still going to get parties. They're just going to call it different fashions. The influence.
The party will be resolved a different way. The thing about elections, even if you stop having your election, is all it does is a vote of confidence to vote the guys out, right? You could have it be that simple. There's a value in having elections because it gets very hard. The bigger the pool, the harder it is to buy the jury, right? This is basically the argument. The second thing is that's only true until you have enough control of the government that you can buy the jury. Or if you have enough special interests that can buy the jury. The way you buy the jury today is buy the jury that can get you to get the people the least competent to vote for you. So for the example is always, I use is a simple one. If we had never had we never had allowed women to vote, we would have never had a progressive legislature president. Would have never happened. So the problem in reality is women. Because women will not vote for responsibility. They will always vote for externalization of responsibility. Even if when they think of it as caring for people, what they're really doing is saying, I don't want responsibility for protecting this capital asset. That's really what they're doing. I almost wish I hadn't studied female behavior. Because it's really quite depressing when you realize 3/4 of what they say is the opposite of what they're trying to do. It's just terrible. It's terrible. It's terribly depressing. And I like my women on a pedestal. Anyway,
that's 90% of the world's population, regardless of sex.
Is that true?
Yes.
Well, if we say, let's do it this way. What's the world have per population? If the world's average population is 83 or something like that, I don't remember what it is right now.
I think that's somewhat separate from attitude towards responsibility.
No, I agree with you. I'm just trying to say, if we take that and then we say, okay, what the ability to make a decision is into the 90s, all right, great. Then what you're saying is that's not an even spread because it's possible for the conscientiousness to be persistent down the grade. I'd have to go do the numbers on it, but it's you are, I don't know if it's 90% of the population, but 90% is closer than 90% incompetent is what you would say, is closer than 90% competent. It's for certain. And then we have the people who are, I've been thinking about, if I didn't have to launch this business right now, I would start a podcast criticizing the people who are out there that are not the ordinary guys, but the intellectual commentariat, and because they're full of shit. It's unbelievable how much they are self-justifying their priors. So anyway, we're running up against our time window here. Yeah. Yeah. So I don't know. That was 6 questions, right?
Yeah, that's 6 questions. But anything else to add to Suki's question about political parties?
I mean, I think we answered it. There's always going to be factions. Factions are going to exist whether you have voting or not. If you have voting and they're going to have factions, then limit the people in the factions that have any influence to those people who have demonstrated responsibility for the commons. I don't think that's terribly difficult to do. We've done it throughout history, and it seems to work pretty well. The problem is the majority democracy. Then the second thing is, are you talking about democracy as decidability, or are you talking about rule of law as decidability? Well, I would say the rule of law is decidability, and then you have democratically elected people to operate within that law, and you have a monarchy to handle exceptions. I think that's the best we can come up with, because that makes use of the most knowledge by the most competency to produce the most commons limited by their ability to do harm. And I think the problem we get which is endemic, and either Martin does it how he sees it, or you do it like I do, which is that you are going to get self-interested behavior of elites no matter what the fuck you do. So the real problem underneath everything is transparency and rule of law. The minute you lose transparency and accountability, it's just time. It's a ticking fucking clock. I mean, what's his name talks about the great man hypothesis, but I just view that as somewhat silly. But I don't disagree with the founder hypothesis. Is founders develop a common interest, but as soon as they get new power, they get power, and they can act on power in their behalf, they begin to diverge in interests, because they're no longer, their interests were primarily to converge to obtain power. Once they have power, their interests are to make use of power.
I think just look at the difference between Jefferson and Adams after the Revolutionary War.
I have to agree with Yarvin on this. It is not absolute power that corrupts; it's partial power, because then they're inclined to use that power to obtain more of it.
Yes,
that absolute power can only harm their own interest by misusing it.
Yep.
Which is one of the justifications for absolute monarchy.
Well, it's one of the justifications for the emperor of mankind. Whatever.
You can't. The problem is, you can't. It'd be good if you could magically look into the future and say this emperor over the next 20 years will not be an idiot, right? You can't do that, right? We have no idea. So it's always good to. It's
but he'll be replaced, possibly sooner rather than later.
Depends on the system. I'll give you an
Depends
example.
on that's not true.
If you compare the Ming emperor with the Qing emperors, i.e. the Manchu emperors on average, right, and also in a few examples, are basically like by far much better than Ming emperors. The Ming emperors, as far as I know, mainly inherited their throne through the primogeniture process, i.e. the oldest son and so on. The Qing emperors actually, now don't quote me on this, I've only loosely read about it, I haven't done any deep research, but from the resources that I've read, they say that the Qing emperors were basically selected by a council of lords. Just because you're the oldest doesn't mean that you automatically get to inherit the throne.
That's right.
But then wouldn't that just lead to lords basically?
Yeah,
ruling?
they have factions. There's like tons of historical period drama shot and written and books and so on about the conflicts within these lords and the complicated political alliances and so on.
Is that really better than a simpler rule like primogeniture that none of them have control over?
No, because the primogeniture oldest son may be a fucking idiot.
Yeah, then he'll be gone soon enough.
Oh no, because he controls all the levers of power.
It doesn't happen.
And then the bureaucracy, the Ming bureaucracy, actually have interest of keeping those emperors in place, because it became a kleptocracy. How do you say that?
Kleptocracy.
Kleptocracy. Excuse me. So that you can keep a dumb idiot emperor in a throne and have surrounded with eunuchs and concubines or whatever, so that the kleptocracies keep on stealing from the country.
That was some peculiarity of Chinese system, because in Roman Empire, idiots were gone very quickly.
Because you have a lot of external power. You have a lot of external competition. China is different. Once you occupy the heartland of China, it's actually pretty hard to assail it. Yeah, again,
Correct.
geography, geopolitics is a bitch. All
right, where are we?
We've answered question 6, and we are at time.
Great. All right, I had a lot of fun today. These are good questions. Suki, especially, thank you very much for the great insight and questions and the depth of them you asked. There's a couple of snippets in there that were quite good. All right. We done? Can I roll up?
Yep.
All right, everybody. It is Francis, Martin, and Curt, the Natural Law Institute. Today has been Friday. This our office hours chat Q&A for Friday, August 21st, 2026. Thank you for seeing us. Look in the comments for links. We are up on YouTube on the Natural Law Institute site. What is that site? What is it called? We're on under what was it? Account. And these are stored under live, which is one of the menu items. If you have a question, the link is going to be in the description below as soon as Francis puts it there. And we look forward to answering more of your questions.